Hello, this is Katrina Stevenson, CEO of the Local Government Association of Tasmania, and this presentation will provide you some basic information about your campaign. One of the reasons that we run our candidate information sessions early and get this material up early is to give you time to plan and prepare your campaign. You need to get out early. It's important to build a profile in your local community. In doing that, you must first decide what is the message that you want to communicate about yourself, about your skills, and about what you'd like to achieve on council, and then think about the best way to do that. It will likely involve a range of different approaches, including advertising, posters and brochures, door knocking, and the use of media, such as letters to the editor. On this last one, I would advise that you be selective and careful in your approach so that you don't appear to have a particular bias when elected to council and having to make decisions. I would also suggest that you make sure you have a contemporary photograph rather than just use an old one. As you are aware, local government elections are conducted by postal ballot. You do have the opportunity to provide a written candidate statement to go with the ballot papers. This is optional, but as it is often the most detailed information a ratepayer will receive before they cast their vote, they are really important and well worth considering. You do, however, only get 600 characters in which to cast your message, so I advise you to write tightly and test your statement with family and friends. Does it represent your priorities and your skills well? Candidate statements are lodged via the Tasmanian Electoral Commission website. They appear in alphabetical order in the ballot packs. There are some constraints on what you can include in your candidate statement. For example, you must not mention another candidate without their written consent. You cannot say that you are a JP. You must not refer to gifts, donations or prizes. Because candidate statements are quite short, you might also want to think about submitting a web link for publication on the TEC website that takes an interested voter to more information about you, your priorities and your skills. Along with your candidate statements, you can supply a photo, although this is also optional. However, people do tend to connect with a face rather than just lines of text. If you do supply a photo, make sure it's recent. It must be a head and shoulders shot on a neutral background. It will be published in black and white, so make sure that your photo works in that context. And you submit it online using the candidate statement form on the Tasmanian Electoral Commission website. In undertaking your campaign, particularly with respect to advertising, it is important to understand there are some limitations and some offences under legislation. Firstly, it is an offence to distribute electoral advertising which contains the name, photograph or likeness of a candidate without their written consent. You must also make sure that your printed or published election advertising materials are fully authorised. The Tasmanian Electoral Commission website provides you detail on the form the authorisation should take. If you are a current councillor, you cannot use council logos or arms in your materials. This also applies to those who aren't on council, although obviously far less likely for them to do that. You need to also understand that any candidate is taken to have incurred the total time and space of an advertisement, even if they're also promoting another candidate. This is important in the context of spend and time limits, which I'll talk about next. The Local Government General Regulations 2015 outline requirements around electoral advertising for local government elections. You need to be aware that there have been recent changes to these provisions. Many of these changes came into effect on the 1st of August. However, one aspect of the changes relating to the maximum amount a candidate can spend on election advertising has been further updated. It will apply for the 9th of August to 30th of October electoral advertising spend period, the relevant period. While the advertising spend was going to be $8,000 for all candidates across all councils, it was only recently picked up that this spend limit now included the cost of pamphlets. Historically, these had not been included when declaring costs and expenditure in the returns made to the Electoral Commission. Recognising that the cost of distributing pamphlets is significantly more in larger urban councils and was indeed likely to exceed the spend threshold, the government agreed to a request to rapidly progress a change. This change will better ensure that new candidates in large councils have sufficient opportunity to raise their profile and in general provides all candidates with greater flexibility in relation to their electoral advertising. The most recent changes now mean that for councils with more than 15,000 properties, based on data we have on rateable valuations collected by the government, the spend limit will be $16,000. So Hobart City Council, Clarence City Council, Glenorchy City Council, if it was facing an election, Launceston City Council and Kingborough Council have a spend limit for their total electoral advertising spend of $16,000. For all other councils, the spend limit is $10,000. Those are councils which have less than 15,000 rateable valuations. The changes made on the 1st of August removed the limitations on the amount of television, radio and newspaper advertising, as well as the limit on the number of signs and posters. Candidates can now do any form of advertising they like as long as they don't exceed the spend limit. In calculating their spend, a candidate must include television, radio, newspaper, posters, signs, pamphlets, how to vote cards and internet advertising. There used to be limits on the number of posters and signs a candidate could display in the council area. However, the changes to the Local Government General Regulations 2015 that came into effect on the 1st of August have removed these limits as long as the expenditure on those signs and posters is counted in the total advertising spend and that the total advertising spend does not exceed the spend limits of $16,000 for the large councils and $10,000 for the smaller councils. See the earlier slide for more information. While there are no limits on the size within the general regulations, there are prescriptions around signage in your local planning scheme. You need to have a look at the sign provisions in the planning scheme to determine when you can put your signs up, when you must take them down by, and what size is acceptable without a permit, or which size triggers a requirement for a planning permit. Ask your council for advice. The updated regulations will be available on www.legislation.tas.gov.au from the 9th of August. And finally, having run your campaign, regardless if you're elected or not, you must lodge with the Tasmanian Electoral Commission within 45 days of the issue of the Certificate of the Election an advertising return. It is an offence not to lodge the advertising return. In the return, you must declare your total advertising spend. That is, your direct and indirect expenditure on radio, television and newspaper advertising, internet advertising, posters and signs, brochures, pamphlets and how to vote cards. For more advice on the advertising return or advertising expenditure requirements, please go to www.tec.tas.gov.au. Good luck in your campaigning.